Got
Hi,
it.
everyone, and welcome. I am talking to my cousin, Shari Robins, who has been living in Israel since 1984. And she joins me now with her personal perspective of what it's like. Shari, it is so great to see you, and I'm so happy you are safe. So,
Thanks. Thanks, cuz it's good to see you too in Cleveland.
so tell me about what life has been like in the last week and a half.
Well, I live in Jerusalem. This is where I've been living since 1984. And Saturday, October 7th, a day that's going to live in Jewish history and Israeli history, woke up to the sound of sirens. And in our building of 7 apartments, we have a bomb shelter in the entrance to the building. So we, quickly just like grabbed robes and went down into the bomb shelter. Had no idea, total surprise, really a total surprise. And then traditionally you wait about like 5-10 minutes or whatever. We went back upstairs, and a little while later there was another one. Being in Jerusalem, we've run into the bomb shelter now for, I would say, about maybe 12 different times. And this is nothing compared though to the horrors of those in the South. But the October 7th really is going to always be remembered as the day where more Jews were killed in any single day since the time of the Holocaust. And we were caught
Tell
off guard.
tell me about, for perspective, how far are you from that region?
We actually could get in the car and drive, let's say, to the border with Gaza in about like an hour and a half or so. I mean, this is a very small country. We are the size of New Jersey, which means then that everybody knows somebody. And it's really a matter of a question of degree, like how many degrees you are separate. Everybody knows somebody somehow who has been murdered, slaughtered in either the peace festival, the music festival that was going on in the South, or soldiers, or hostages. We all somehow are connected to one another.
So when you heard the news as to what was actually happening, what went through your mind? What was the reaction from your family and in your immediate community?
Uh, One of, I would say, real shock, because this came 50 years and one day after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, when we were also caught off guard, when Egypt moved in and Syria moved in, Egypt coming from the south and Syria from the north. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, where we didn't have back then the communications and the technology that we have today, where a lot of our information is happening through WhatsApp immediately. You get the WhatsApps. Where are you? Are you safe? Did you get to a shelter? That's where the names are all being posted. Does anybody, the messages on Facebook also of pictures of people. This person has not been seen since the music festival Saturday morning, October 7th. If anybody has their whereabouts, please contact. And that kind of stuff didn't exist back in 1973 during that war. So this was 50 years and one day later. And that actually is opening up a wound from 50 years ago as well. When those sirens go off, though, where we are in Jerusalem, we have a minute and a half to get to safety. Those people that are on the, like, just outside those communities, just outside of the Gaza Strip, they sometimes have as little as 10 to 30 seconds. But here you had, on a Saturday sleepy morning, when it was also not just the Sabbath, but also a Jewish holiday that's called the Joy of the Torah, Simchat Torah. And all these very quiet communities, the 22 communities lying in sovereign state of Israel, suddenly Hamas terrorists cross over in what was a fence that was supposed to protect And there's a lot of criticism right now of what happened. All of that unpacking is going to, and the finger pointing will happen later, of course. But crossing over and then just slaughtering, families going into homes. There was one, the images are really hard. There was one family, a family of 5, that was found hugging each other in bed, and they just were slaughtered. And then the picture then that now, as of yesterday, because they were buried, are the 5 coffins lined up. Or another story of, a 13-year-old boy in one of those communities who went out for a run, 13 years old, went out for a morning run, and that's why he is alive. His sisters, his parents, his grandparents, all slaughtered. The funeral was yesterday. It was, as more and more of the information comes out, it's just more and more horrific. All of those images of, have you seen this person? Now it's a DNA testing has proven that the charred, burned body of person who was at this music festival was finally identified, or those people taken as hostage, or we thought were hostage, being taken into hostage into the Gaza Strip, were not maybe taken because their body was found. So we're still uncovering. Bodies have still not been identified. And so every day it's still, the information is coming out, and it is absolutely heart-wrenching. It's enraging. It's frightening. The emotions is, we're just on these emotional roller coasters that every day, all the time.
One of the things, though, that's a little different for you, because you've been through numerous events similar to this, where Israel was always under fire, always surrounded by countries that don't want it, for the simplest way of explaining it. But what was different about this one?
One thing maybe would be our underestimation of Hamas. There was a belief among some that, you give money, Qatari money, suitcases of money that was brought in from Qatar at the approval of the government, that will appease them. No, or let's go after rockets, let's say 2014. That operation, a reaction to go in, do a Band-Aid fix, and come back out. Operations, not wars. This is a war. This is a war, and Hamas is really the embodiment of just complete and total evil. It's what our parents, grandparents, my dad, your Uncle Ed fought in World War II. And it's this generation's battle with ultimate evil, because Hamas will not just stop with Israel, with Jews. It's the rise in anti-Semitism in the United States right now, throughout the world. It is their ultimate goal, really, with the backing of Iran, is an Islamically ruled world, and many innocents are caught up in that. President Biden was just here yesterday, and that meant like so much to us Israelis, so much. First of all, the American support, but to have him come and to meet with families of the hostages, and he sort of made the analogy, as some Americans are saying, that this is Israel's 9/11. Well, if you want to actually translate numbers, that would be the equivalent of 44,000 Americans being slaughtered. 44,000. But there's a difference, and this is where I actually don't hold by this is Israel's 9/11, because after those horrific events, where I remember at the time I was visiting with my 1-year-old, who's now 23, in Cleveland, in my parents' home in Cleveland, Ohio. And you, Monica, you called and said, don't leave your house. Don't leave your house, because one of the towers went down and we turned on the television. We all know the horrors of 9/11. And my mother, may she rest in peace, turned to me at that moment and said, Shari, you always said that terrorism one day was going to come to the United States. It was just a matter of time, and it's here. But this is not our 9/11. And the reason for that is no one ever questioned the United States going after the perpetrators. And we are being challenged and questioned and, stop the war. This is ultimate evil. This is no longer needing a Band-Aid. I don't have any solutions here. I represent myself. I'm not a military analyst. I'm not a politician, even though I was participating in the protests against our government for 40 consecutive weeks, but that's something else. We should not be questioned. We have to defend our citizens. And the first few days, as you asked, how is it different? The first few days, there was a lot of support pouring out. The media, it doesn't take much to tip that balance. And if or when there is a ground invasion into Gaza, there will be more innocent people being killed. And that is a tragedy. That is an absolute tragedy. And that is why we have been saying to the Palestinians in northern Gaza, go to southern Gaza. Who's stopping them from doing that? Hamas. Because more innocent Palestinians killed is what is used against us. And the misinformation, such as the rocket hitting the hospital, immediately Israel was blamed for it, when all of the video footage is showing that it was an Islamic Jihad rocket set off that landed short. But there's a narrative here that after those first few days of the horror of all those dead Jews, and not all of them were Jewish, by the way. There were foreign nationals that were killed. There were those that were taking care of the elderly that come, let's say, from the Philippines or other places in Asia as for jobs here. It wasn't just Jews, but Hamas didn't target people and say, excuse me, let me, say, are you Jewish? Are you Israeli? It was just mass slaughter. What I would like to see, though, Monica, is I would like to see Americans, Israelis, Jews, the entire world protesting together to say, free Gaza from Hamas, free the Palestinians of Hamas, because they are not representing all Palestinians. And those innocent Palestinian lives, that hurts me too. That war is a horrible thing, but I don't think our hands can be tied any longer, not after October 7th.
Give us the history lesson, because I think a lot of people are confused that this is a conflict between Israel and Gaza. It is not. Can you explain why?
We, in 2005, unilaterally left Gaza. There were some Jewish settlements there. Greenhouses were built, communities were built. And it was decided under Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who was a very hawkish prime minister, that enough is enough. And this wasn't about land for peace, like the peace agreement, let's say, with Anwar Sadat in Egypt. You give us land, we give you peace. And this is not a sit around the campfire and sing kumbaya kind of peace, but it's better, a cold peace is better than a hot war, right? And then also with Jordan, peace is signed, a little bit of land swaps agreement is signed. This was in 2005, a unilateral disengagement from Gaza, giving those communities that space to the leadership at the time, the Palestinian Authority. And those communities, instead of saying, here's an opportunity, we're leaving you the greenhouses, it was all destroyed. And then 2 years later, under so-called democratic elections, Hamas comes on the scene. And from rooftops, they're beginning to throw off from the rooftops Palestinian Fatah members, meaning that it's part of the leadership of the Palestinian Authority. We're not doing a whole history lesson here, but when you hear Palestinian Authority Mahmoud Abbas say that he stands behind the Gazans and he stands behind the Palestinians and it's terrible what Israel is doing, if he himself would be in Gaza, he'd be thrown off a rooftop as well. There's no great love between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. So we have actually not been in Gaza since 2005. I don't know how far back you want your history lesson to go,
No, I think I think the difference too is Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
This may not have been Israel's 9/11, as you so eloquently put, but this was a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
And one of the things I find very interesting is the UN and other countries seem to be limiting or asking Israel to limit their response. How do Israelis take that?
You kind of have to ask another question, kind of being very Jewish here. You ask a question, I ask you a question back, Who's pulling the strings here with Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is on the northern border with Israel? It's Iran. That's where the money is coming from. That's where the support is coming from. So when world leaders say to Israel, hold off, we've done that before. We've done that in other operations. I don't know what the alternative is necessarily, but I know that after the death count and in fact that we still have hostages, more than 200 hostages, civilians in Gaza, we can't be told to hold off. It's double standards. And Israel very often has been held to double standards. What is all right for other countries to do in self-defense, or even really, as I said about 9/11, the United States going over and looking for bin Laden. There's a double standard, and we can't stand quietly any longer. I mean, I don't know, a ground invasion. These hostages are probably being kept deep underground. What will be their fate? I don't know, but of the more than 200, there are Americans among them. To give you two examples, when I first moved here in 1984, I moved to a kibbutz. And that kibbutz was first established by many people, but one of them is a woman named Vivian Silver. And then Vivian Silver, over in the 90s, moved over to Kibbutz Be'eri. Kibbutz Be'eri, where they just buried about a quarter of their kibbutz. Vivian is somewhere in the Gaza Strip. And Vivian, her whole life, she has been a peace activist. She has friends in Gaza. She has worked for moving women's empowerment with Palestinians her whole life. And she is a victim as well. You also have Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who the family lives here in Jerusalem. And he is a hostage as well. His parents actually just were put on the front cover of Time magazine, talking about the agony of what it is to not know, the uncertainty, not knowing of what's happening. And right now there's a lot of talk. The Israelis have to allow humanitarian aid in, that water and electricity has been cut off. Israel needs to give. We need to have the Red Cross see these hostages. We can't just be giving, we need to also be receiving. These hostages have not seen the Red Cross. And when we talk about double standards, the Red Cross is full of them. So the fate of those 200 are part of our prayers as well as those that are mourning. And yet with all of that grief, Monica, I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen Israel so incredibly beautifully united. Whereas the demonstrations and the criticism of the government, well, all of that is put aside. All of that is put aside. And the outpouring, the incredible outpouring of volunteering. This morning, I went to buy tomatoes that were brought in from just outside of the Gaza Strip. People loaded up this huge truck with tomatoes, that those tomatoes would just be destroyed if they're not harvested. And the long lines to be able to have the opportunity to buy these tomatoes to support those agricultural farms. The housing that is being offered, the just mobilization of so many different organizations that are collecting money, that are offering emotional support, buying equipment and food. And I've been, my own small little part about, giving donations and taking items to a place where they can be distributed to those Jewish refugees, because once again, there's this double standard. We hear about the Palestinian refugees that are, from the northern part of Gaza to the southern part of Gaza. But there are Jewish refugees in this country from those 22 communities that, their homes were destroyed. And on the northern border, where things are heating up or, simmering, I don't know which, with Hezbollah on the northern border, the Jewish communities along that northern border, those people have evacuated. They're refugees as well. Many of them, they're being organized and housed here in Jerusalem, a lot of them down near the Dead Sea. But the total outpouring, Monica, of just how much we are in this together. Because President Biden always tells this amazing story about when Golda Meir whispered in his ear that, our secret weapon is we have no other place to go. That's it. We have no other place.
You have a very different connection as well. Your daughters, Odelia is 19 and Eliana is 23. And Odelia is in the service.
Yeah,
I can't imagine what that's like right now, knowing that there's a ground invasion imminent. The
unit that she is actually in, I can't give locations, Monica, but the unit that she is actually in is actually an education unit. I mean, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, puts a very high value on education. So her job is actually like her mom. She's a tour guide, and she would give, tours to soldiers, their units, when the commanding officer says, we're going to do something nice for you guys. We're going to go on a 3-day tour of someplace in Israel. And her unit is the ones that will be the tour guides. But she belongs to a group of people where most of the women are in the education unit. The men are all in a combat unit, including her boyfriend of 2 years. And this makes this particular war or part of the conflict very, very different for me. I have on my refrigerator no, I don't want to show their pictures. I can't show them. But their group of these amazing guys, some of them that I've known since they were in 7th grade. And, the names of each one of them and their parents' names and where they live. And you look at this photo and you just pray, Yeah, it's very different this time.
You said earlier, before I started recording that, you know, your daughters were out of the country when this happened.
Yeah, they were. My older daughter is post-army, very common in Israeli culture that after you finish the army, you go on some like big trip, kind of clean your head is the Hebrew expression. So she was in India, and then the war starts. And she, and along with so many other Israelis where she was in India, were scrambling to get home. My soldier daughter actually had a week off from the army. So she actually was in Greece on a vacation and immediately came back. So it kind of raises this interesting kind of question of the, how is it that you as a mother, you want your child to come back to a war zone? But the thing is they want to. I never asked either one of them to come back. They want to come back. And the flights were filled with Israeli coming home. There's when the army calls people up for reserves in times like this, they expect to maybe get like about 80% to answer the call. 150% are showing up. They're returning from all over the world or within the country itself because putting on uniforms, and because there is no other place. There just is. This is home, and we'll fight for it.
I know a lot of people have been asking you, why are you still there? Why haven't you come home? You have places to be in Cleveland. Why haven't you come home?
Because this is home, Monica. I come back, I visit Cleveland. Actually, when when the war broke out, was my 45th high school reunion, Cleveland Heights High. So I come back. My brother still lives in the Cleveland area. My parents are buried in Cleveland. I have dear friends who live in Cleveland. But this is home. This is the choice I made. And I can understand why people would ask that question. People are asking a lot of questions these days, and I just try very hard to not judge anyone's decisions. I actually know of a family this morning while I was standing in line to get these tomatoes. Somebody I know said, I know people that are leaving tomorrow to fly to Canada, but with great angst, she shared that. It's not an easy time to be in a family unit where you have small children. Yeah, I think one of the things is on Facebook, again, social media, but something that really struck me to the core was when my kids were really little, you always talk about, well, there really are no monsters. It's just it's a bad dream or whatever. And this Facebook post said, well, how do you tell your child, I'm sorry, sweetheart, but there actually are monsters? And again, to just make this very clear distinction, Hamas is not the Palestinian people. This is not about saying all Palestinians are bad. They are not. This is about, as you said yourself, this is about a terror organization that is not interested in any kind of peaceful resolution to this. So yeah, this is home. I do like Cleveland, though. I do like visiting. I love seeing you when I'm in Cleveland.
What does Hamas want?
It's in their charter. It's very clear. Their charter is to wipe out the state of Israel, to kill the Jews. That when you see demonstrations, which are growing now in the States, free Palestine, the continuation of that from the sea to the river. And what that means, what that actually is saying. And I'm not even sure, honestly, if all the people in those demonstrations even understand it themselves. But what it actually means is the state of Israel should not exist. Should not exist. That's the charter of Hamas.
Are there any other things that you find that people are confused about when it comes to this particular conflict, this attack, that you wish you could clarify and make people understand, this is not what you think it is?
I think it's the simplicity of how people approach this. My profession is I'm a tour guide, a very unemployed tour guide right now with all the cancellations that poured in. But one of the things that I often will ask tourists at some point during a tour is, so you hear about the conflict. When do you think this conflict actually began? And the most common answer that I receive is 1967. The Six-Day War, June of 1967. And then that is when Egypt and Jordan and Syria all were, attacking. And the result of it was taking the Sinai Peninsula, taking the Golan Heights, taking East Jerusalem, which allowed then Jews to go to the holy sites for Judaism, meaning the Western Wall located in the Old City, and the West Bank, which is simply the West Bank of the Jordan River. That's why it's called that. And then a long process of the building of settlements. So when I ask this question, which for many Jews is just, hey, open up the Bible. This is a real estate deed. And it says, this is, where Jacob put that rock down for a pillow and he slept here. So we're going to build the settlement and maintain its name, calling it Bethel, Beit El. But 1967 is not the beginning. That is not the beginning of the conflict. And then it gets into a whole discussion that I have with people of, okay, so what are other possible dates? Was it 1948 with the establishment of the State of Israel? Was it earlier than that? Was it 1917 when the United Kingdom in the Balfour Declaration says that it looks upon with favor the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, as the area was called at its time? Any Jew, ironically, born here prior to 1948 is a Palestinian. It's just that the term has morphed and changed over time. So I think what is important is to just understand that this is not a simple, quick solve. This is not black and white. This is not something that started in 1967. And part of what is so frightening to many people is, look, in 2005, we left the Gaza Strip completely, and look what we got instead. If we did the same thing in the West Bank, then what would happen there? That would go back to the narrowest border of Israel from 1948 to 67 being 9 miles between the Mediterranean Sea and the border of what is like the most western side of the West Bank. So, think about it, Monica, you're at your studio right now. You get in your car and you drive for 9 miles, okay, drive 9 miles. And then on the other side of that 9 miles for 19 years, there were people that wanted to just destroy you. So there's a fear then of, if this is what happened in Gaza, could this happen in the West Bank? My political views don't matter here at all, but it's the complexity. And whenever I'm working with tourists, I kind of always say, if you leave my tour more confused than you arrived, then actually I think I did a good job.
Because it's not clear, and is it political?
Help me understand your question. Is what political?
Was the attack political? Was it because of a land grab? Was it because
no. No. This has nothing to do with it. No, this is not about a land grab. No. This was Hamas doing what it has threatened to do, and which we have, when we gave cement to rebuild homes. They were instead used for underground tunnels that would bring terrorists into Israel. We build a fence. That's what was broken down. But this was not political at all. No, in my feeling, this was simply Hamas doing what it said it always was going to do. And what has been found actually in the field is those Hamas terrorists that were killed, looking at the documents that they have, there was descriptions, like sort of instructions of go for the women, go for the children, take hostages, slaughter families. I mean, this was their goal. Where's the politics in that? This was just taking people who went to a music festival and then gathering them up, surrounding them with pickup trucks, and just slaughtering them, reminiscent of things that happened during the Holocaust. There's no politics in that.
What do you expect to happen next?
Oh, well, I don't know. There will probably be a ground invasion. That's terribly frightening to me on a very personal level, but more than that, how long will, how long of a war will that be? How, are those tunnels booby trapped? And what about the hostages? And, how long will the world say, keep going, take care of Hamas because it's good for all of us. This is not just about Israel. This really isn't. And that's so important to understand. This is about Jews being able to feel safe anywhere in the world. And beyond that, this is about also eventually going for the Christians and those that just are not seen as worthy of this global sort of Islamic fanatic, I have to say, because Islam as a religion is not fanatic. It has been warped and manipulated. And behind behind the curtain, it's Iran. And Iran is very, very frightening. Its nuclear capabilities or near nuclear capabilities. And also what's frightening is, right now the focus, Monica, is all about, Gaza. Hamas is a tiny little gang, okay? A terrorist organization, but it's a gang in contrast to Hezbollah over in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, bordering with Israel. That's an army, a well-supplied army with money coming from Iran. I was talking today to somebody I work for a tour company. We were talking again about, well, we got to cancel this because of the group. It's not coming, yada, yada. And, because since COVID, people can work anywhere. So I always thought that he worked near the office, which is kind of near Tel Aviv. And he said, no, I actually work out of my home way up north. And he told me the name of the community. And I said, whoa. And he said, yeah. And I'm scared to death of the other foot dropping. So what's going to happen next? I don't know. I really don't know, Monica. I mean, what I would, in an ideal world, in like some fantasy kind of world, I would like Hamas to realize that we're not going anywhere. So just forget it. Allow the Palestinians to rule themselves peacefully. That Iran, forget it. We're not going to stand by and allow nuclear empowerment. I would also like to see our government be totally shifted as a result of this. But I don't know what's going to happen. But the spirit here is very, very strong. It's two things, really. It's frightening. There's a lot of grief. the funeral that I went to, was just absolutely heart-wrenching to be at. One of hundreds. But it's also so spiritually uplifting to see people helping each other, taking care of each other. By nature, I'm an optimist. I remain optimistic, but I'm also a realist. And this is certainly out of all those times that I've been here where you and I have talked and recorded things before in the past, the different intifadas and Scud missiles coming over from Iraq and gas masks and all that kind of stuff. You and I have talked about that kind of stuff. But this is different, and it's never been like this before, not since I've been here. And that is frightening. And, we've had a quiet time to chat, no sirens. Because I thought to myself when we were starting the Zoom, I thought, well, let's see if the siren goes off. Do I take the computer down to the bomb shelter with me so you could kind of like continue the conversation down there? But it's been quiet for a couple of days here. And in some ways that quiet is very deceptive. Feels a little bit like the quiet before storm.
Are you concerned when the Hamas leader called out for jihad and the day of rage and last Friday and it didn't happen? Are you concerned that
I'm actually concerned
off guard?
When anybody sort of like says, hey, let's go out and kill a bunch of people. That's scary. Okay, the fact that it didn't happen was obviously a relief, but it's more than that though, Monica. I think it's maybe a little bit of questioning of how much support really is there for that. Because it's yes, there's a lot of hatred out there, and there are demonstrations happening all over the world right now. But I don't know how much of that calling for a day of rage was just, ruffling feathers, or if it was perhaps hopeful. Again, we were, and this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation, we were caught off guard. There should not have been 2,500 Hamas terrorists being able to cross a border just by bulldozing a fence and then coming in with motorcycles and pickup trucks and on foot. That should not have happened. But now we have, sort of learned a tragic lesson. There are already certain people in the military and the government who have said, I take the blame. We'll deal with that later. This is not the time for that. But I think lessons already learned is the day of rage last Friday. I don't know how far that would have gotten. But yeah, it's not very comfortable to hear somebody call for a day of rage, because it frightens not only, well, its purpose. What is a terror organization? Its purpose is to terrorize. By coming out with an explanation like that, a call to jihad, the purpose of that is to terrorize. And you can buy into that terror because it is frightening, or not buy into it.
Where do you find hope?
Whoa. I think I find hope in the essential goodness in people. And what we're faced with right now, though, is a terrorist organization that in its essence is evil. And my belief that goodness will win out. That the goodness in people, life is a struggle, but that the goodness and the essence of people being good and kind to each other will win out.
What can people in Cleveland do?
There are a lot of organizations that are now asking for donations, and that's fantastic, to help those Jewish refugees who have lost everything, to help the army that with the influx of all these Israelis coming to rejoin the units, maybe that don't have the equipment, to help the medical profession. I know, like some of my friends, we got together and we made 400 sushi rolls that we took to Hadassah Medical Hospital to just give out to the workers so they could have some decent food to grab with all the incredible holy work that they are doing. So there, whatever kind of speaks to a person individually, if it's about medical or if it's about, supplies to find, rebuilding, like Jewish National Fund is doing a big campaign as well. The reform movement, the conservative movement here all have websites. My only word of caution, though, however, is that unfortunately in the world of the media is that you have to be careful who you're donating. You just have to really check and make sure that you're donating to a reputable organization, that the money is going to where it needs. I belong to a lot of WhatsApp groups, but one of them in particular is every morning they are publishing what are the needs. So the other day, a bunch of us got together, we pooled a bunch of money and we went to a grocery store and we bought like the equivalent of, I guess it would be like a couple $100 of baby formula that then were distributed. So all of that requires money as well. So that is one positive thing, but I think more, not more than that. In addition to that, speaking out, because as the voices of anti-Israel get stronger, and they will, that I don't doubt that even though right now, maybe being Jewish in the United States is hard, maybe scary, to have your voice heard. There is also a campaign to write to senators and congressmen to have the hostages released. I mentioned only two of them, Vivian Silver and Hirsch Goldman Putin, that they're only two, but have the hostages released. What that means, how that would work, I don't know. I don't know. That's, I think, what is really important, and not to be left alone. Not to many people are can feel isolated in times like this, not just here in Israel, but elsewhere. Talk to each other, find comfort in each other, find strength in each other. That I think is really important, how to get through these times.
How do I say I love you in Hebrew?
Okay, we'll go through this. All right. Ani.
Ani.
Okay. Ohevet.
Ohevet.
And then you're going to get the kind of going on here because Hebrew is a very guttural language. Otach.
Otach.
Monica, Ani ohevet otach. I love you.
Ani.
Ohevet.
Ohevet. Chata.
Yeah, okay. We'll give you a good Hebrew lesson over a beer when I get to hear you sing again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shari, my cousin, I love you.
Love you too.
And please give my love to Hannah and the girls.
I will.
And please stay safe.
God willing. Yes. And thank you so much, Monica, for this opportunity to be able to do what I just asked others to do, is to speak out. I really very deeply, deeply appreciate the opportunity.
You're very welcome, and you stay safe. And we will stay in touch.
Absolutely.
And hopefully when we speak again, if it's sooner rather than later, this will be behind us.
From your words, God's ears. Yeah.
Shalom.
Shalom. Bye.